For months, he stood by the gate every morning, sometimes with a flower, sometimes with nothing but a hopeful smile, and said the same thing. "Will you marry me?" I never gave him more than a soft laugh or a polite shake of my head. It became a routine, almost like a strange ritual we both silently agreed to. He was my neighbor, Ansh, the boy next door with unyielding eyes and too much sincerity in his voice. At first, I thought he was joking. Then, when he didn't stop, I assumed he was just one of those men who loved the chase. So I kept ignoring him. I had no time for love, certainly not the kind that bloomed so loudly. My world was orderly, my days structured, my emotions buried under layers of past wounds I never dared revisit. Ansh, however, didn't seem to notice or care about the wall I had built. Rain or shine, he appeared without fail. Always kind, always calm, always asking the same question. I should have been annoyed, but deep down, I began to anticipate his presence. I would glance through the curtain before stepping out, checking if he was there. And when he was, a strange warmth settled in my chest, one I didn't want to name. Still, I stayed silent, convinced that if I gave even a little, he'd take too much. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I had just returned from the market, arms heavy with bags and mind lost in errands, when I saw him standing by my door. No flower this time, just folded hands, head slightly bowed, and eyes too full of something I couldn't decipher. "Please," he said softly, "just say yes once. That's all I ask." There was no grin, no tease, no performance. He looked tired, not in body but in heart. It was as if carrying his hope for so long had finally begun to wear him down. And something in me cracked. Maybe it was guilt, maybe loneliness, or maybe, though I couldn't admit it then, I had started feeling something too. Something that felt dangerously close to affection. I nodded. His eyes widened, disbelief flashing for a moment before a slow, quiet smile spread across his face. He didn't cheer or jump or call it a victory. He just whispered, "Thank you," as if I had saved him. That night, I lay awake thinking of his expression. How vulnerable he had looked. How patient he had been. I had spent so long fearing love would break me that I never considered it might heal something instead. It felt like the beginning of something unknown, something real. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel afraid. I felt curious. The next evening, Ansh invited me to his house. His voice was light when he asked, but his eyes watched me carefully, as though my answer might unravel him. I hesitated. We had exchanged only stolen glances and brief conversations in passing. This wasn't just a neighborly visit, it felt like stepping into something deeper, something unspoken. Still, I said yes. His house mirrored him, quiet, neat, unassuming. A soft melody played in the background, barely audible over the hum of the ceiling fan. He led me to the living room where 2 cups of chai waited on the table, steam curling upward like whispers. We sat across from each other, knees almost touching. He spoke first, his voice gentle and unforced. "You've always felt distant," he said, not accusing, just observing. "Like you were holding the world at arm's length." I didn't deny it. Instead, I looked at my cup, watching the tiny bubbles cling to the rim. "Maybe I was," I murmured. "Maybe I still am." He didn't push. He just nodded, as though he understood something I couldn't even articulate. The conversation turned soft, fluid, like water finding its path through stone. We talked about trivial things, his childhood pet, my favorite books, how both of us hated loud places. Slowly, the space between us softened. Our laughter came easier, our words less guarded. Somewhere between his jokes and my reluctant smiles, a connection stitched itself between us. It wasn't grand or cinematic. It was ordinary in the most disarming way. After a while, he glanced at the window and said, "It's getting warm in here. The power backup's weak. Let's go to the room. There's a fan there." I paused. My heartbeat, steady until then, quickened ever so slightly. Still, I followed. His room was simple, bed neatly made, a shelf full of novels, a half-finished canvas on an easel. He wasn't hiding anything. There were no illusions, just a quiet invitation into his space. We sat on the edge of the bed. The fan whirred above, rhythmically slicing through the silence. "Do you feel safe here?" he asked, not looking at me, but at the painting across the room. The question caught me off guard. I thought for a moment before answering. "Yes," I said truthfully. He turned to me, smiled faintly, and said nothing. That silence, strangely enough, felt more intimate than anything spoken. For the first time in years, I wasn't shielding myself. There were no walls between us, only time and possibility stretching out ahead. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew something had shifted, and I wasn't ready to walk away from it. The room was quiet, save for the gentle whirring of the fan above. Ange sat beside me on the bed, our shoulders barely touching, yet the air between us felt charged, like something invisible was waiting to be acknowledged. I kept my eyes on the painting across the room. It was unfinished, a portrait of a woman with a blurred face. I wondered if it was someone he once knew or someone he imagined. Before I could ask, he spoke. "Lie down," he said softly. "You'll feel more relaxed." I looked at him, startled. The request was simple, almost casual, but something in his tone made my pulse quicken. "I'm fine sitting," I replied, attempting to smile. "Really?" He turned toward me, his eyes searching mine. "Just for a minute," he insisted, reaching for my hand. "I promise nothing more." Still, I hesitated. I didn't want to ruin the comfort that had settled between us. But I also wasn't sure what this moment meant, or where it would lead. Then, without waiting for an answer, he gently guided me backward. His hands weren't rough, but they were firm. Before I could gather my thoughts, I was lying beside him, his breath close to my cheek. "Ange," I whispered, my voice uncertain. He silenced me with a kiss. It landed softly on my lips, then deepened with a hunger I didn't expect. My instincts screamed to move, to speak, to stop him, but my body froze, caught between fear and a strange, trembling curiosity. His hands moved with purpose, undoing the buttons of my top, sliding it from my shoulders with reverent slowness. I tried to protest, but my voice had gone thin, like paper against water. "Don't be afraid," he murmured, now slipping out of his own shirt. "Just trust me." And somehow I did. When his skin touched mine, my breath caught. I should have pushed him away. I knew that. But there was a softness in his touch, a kind of desperate tenderness that made me feel seen, wanted. I had spent so long living in numbness that I didn't realize how much I craved the heat of another body pressed against mine. He kissed me again, my neck, my collarbone, down to the hollow between my ribs. My eyes fluttered shut. I stopped thinking. In that moment, the world narrowed to skin and breath and the strange ache of longing I didn't know I carried. When it was over, we lay in silence. He rested his head on my shoulder, breathing steady, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. I stared at the ceiling, 1,000 thoughts swirling in my head, none of them forming clear answers. All I knew was this. Something had been awakened in me. Something dangerous. Something real. And I wasn't sure I could turn back. In the days that followed, I became someone I didn't recognize. Every hour felt like an ache, every silence a void only he could fill. I waited for his messages like they were oxygen, checked my phone too often, replayed our time together in my mind until I couldn't tell if I was remembering or daydreaming. I told myself it was love, but somewhere deep down, I knew it was something else, something darker. Ange didn't change. He was still kind, still gentle, still present. But he never spoke of what had happened that night. He didn't frame it with words or promises. It was as if he had simply folded that moment into silence and tucked it away, leaving me to carry its weight alone. I visited him more often now, sometimes under the pretense of returning something small, sugar, a book, a borrowed charger. We sat closer, touched longer. He kissed me like he knew I wouldn't stop him. And I didn't. I didn't want to. One evening, as I stood in his kitchen stirring tea, a knock sounded at the door. He stiffened, his entire body tense. Then, calmly, he turned to me and said, "Go wait in the room." I obeyed, without asking why. From behind the bedroom door, I heard a woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. She laughed lightly as she stepped in. Ange greeted her with the same warmth he once gave me. I pressed my ear to the door. "I missed you," she said. "I missed you too," he replied without hesitation. The words hit like glass in my throat. I stepped back, heart pounding, suddenly aware of how naked I felt, even fully clothed. When she finally left, I came out. He looked surprised to see me standing there, eyes sharp with something between guilt and regret. "You didn't tell me," I whispered. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's complicated." "Is she your girlfriend?" I asked, though I already knew. "She's someone I've known for a long time," he said, voice low. "We're figuring things out." I nodded slowly, as if my body were processing faster than my heart could. I should have walked out. I should have screamed, cried, left with whatever self-respect I had left. But I stayed. That night, when he pulled me into his arms, I let him. Not because I forgave him, but because my heart had already tethered itself to him. Logic screamed, but desire drowned it out. I knew what this was now. Not love. Not entirely. It was need. It was addiction. And I had become its quiet, willing prisoner. I tell myself I can leave. That I will. Tomorrow. But then I hear his voice, feel his touch, and everything inside me unravels again. Maybe this is what heartbreak looks like. Slow, silent, and entirely self-inflicted. And still, I can't stay away.